Beneath the great amphitheater of Rome, in the year 73 before the birth of Christ, a man sat in the dim corner of a stone chamber. The air was heavy with dust and the faint scent of oil from the torches outside. Iron cuffs bound his wrists, rubbing his skin raw with each small movement. Above him, the crowd roared like distant thunder. Tens of thousands of voices rose and fell with excitement, cheering as athletes and fighters tested their skill in the arena. Through the grates overhead drifted traces of the day's contests, dust, heat, and the restless energy of spectacle. Around him, others waited in silence, each trapped in their own thoughts. His name in Rome was Marcus, though in Thrace he had been Cleomenes. Years earlier, Roman legions had carried him far from the mountains of his youth, through lands and seas he had never imagined. Now, he awaited his turn to step into the arena above, armed with a weapon he had scarcely trained to use. Yet on this night, something unexpected happened. In the shadows, a fighter named Spartacus began to speak. His voice was low but carried weight. He spoke of boundaries, limits to what even the might of Rome could do. He told of laws written long before, preserved on bronze tablets, debated in marble halls, laws that placed restraints even on those who claimed absolute authority. Marcus listened, hardly breathing. He had long believed that his life belonged entirely to another, that his fate was as fixed as the path of the sun. Yet here was a reminder that even the empire recognized lines that could not be crossed, even for those without freedom. The world Marcus lived in was one where nearly 1/5 of the population lived in bondage. The chains were not only iron, but also laws, traditions, and the machinery of the empire's economy. Rome was a place where people were bought and sold in markets, where public life moved to the rhythm of transactions, and where entire households depended on the unseen hands that kept them running. In the homes of the wealthy, those in service cooked, cleaned, kept records, cared for children, and ensured order. They were ever present, yet rarely seen, woven into the fabric of the city's life. Without them, the vast empire would have faltered in days. Yet even here, there were rules, lines that even the most powerful were expected to respect. For all its severity, Roman law was still law. It applied to those who imagined themselves untouchable. One of the most surprising limits was this: an owner could not take the life of a servant without lawful cause. It was not compassion, but order. An enslaved person was valuable property, often worth more than a skilled artisan's yearly earnings. Destroying such value without reason was wasteful and dangerous to stability. Order depended on balance. Excessive harshness risked unrest. Too much leniency risked disobedience. And in this balance lay the first cracks in Rome's great machine, cracks Spartacus had begun to see. And in that dim chamber beneath the arena, Marcus felt the first stirrings of a dangerous thought: if Rome itself admitted its power had limits, could those limits be broken? The roar above faded into muffled echoes as Spartacus continued. He spoke not of rebellion, not yet, but of the strange truth within Rome's own laws. Even for those in bondage, there were protections, however thin. Not born of kindness, but of necessity. The first, Marcus had already heard: life could not be taken without cause. A master who killed without lawful reason risked more than whispers. He could face financial penalties, loss of standing, and the cold exclusion of Rome's elite circles. The law shielded valuable property because the empire could not afford chaos born of reckless cruelty. The second limit concerned religion. In Rome, faith was a public duty. Those in service were expected to honor the state gods, join in festivals, and keep the household's sacred rites. But the law allowed them to keep pieces of their own traditions, quietly, in private, so long as it did not challenge Rome's authority. A Celtic girl could whisper prayers to her triple goddess in the corner of a kitchen. A Jewish scribe might light small Sabbath candles when no one watched. A Germanic guard could murmur a plea to Woden before taking his post. To the master, such allowances kept order. To the servant, they preserved the last fragments of self. The third limit lay in the bonds between people. Rome recognized that even the unfree formed attachments, to spouses, to children, to close companions. Tear these apart without care, and you risked creating someone with nothing left to lose. Guidelines advised selling a craftsman and his son together, or keeping a nurse's children near her. These were not acts of mercy, but acts of prudence. Punishment, too, had boundaries. Roman law allowed discipline for serious offenses, questioning during investigations, even markings for misconduct. But it demanded proportion. Cruelty without purpose was considered the mark of a poor leader. A damaged worker was a wasted investment. A master who punished out of amusement risked both his reputation and his household stability. There were rules about testimony. Those in bondage could speak in court, but their words carried less weight. They could accuse their master only in rare, serious crimes, treason, murder, threats to the state. Judges knew the danger of coached testimony and tested it with careful questioning. And then there was the peculium. A small, fragile right, the ability to earn and keep modest sums. It belonged to the master-in-law, but in practice it was often respected. With it, a servant might one day buy freedom, purchase tools, or help a friend escape harsher fate. Hope, Rome had learned, was a powerful leash. Spartacus's words wove these limits into a picture Marcus had never seen before. They were not kindnesses. They were the empire's own safeguards, designed to preserve control. Yet they proved something Rome would never say aloud. Even the most powerful feared what might happen if all restraints were gone. And in that moment, Marcus understood what Spartacus was truly offering them, not freedom yet, but the knowledge of where the cracks ran deepest. The chamber grew colder as night deepened. A torch sputtered in its wall bracket, throwing restless shadows. Somewhere beyond the stone, chains rattled, a slow, deliberate sound that did not belong to any guard's patrol. Spartacus lowered his voice. "There is something Rome does not put in its laws," he said. "It is known only to those who have seen the inside of both the Senate's halls and the barracks cells." Marcus leaned forward. The others shifted, drawn by the weight in his tone. When the fire swept through Capua 2 winters past, Spartacus continued, they blamed the wind and bad fortune. "But I heard it was lit by the order of a man whose name no one dares to speak here, because the land beneath was worth more cleared than built." The words hung in the air like smoke. If true, it meant Rome's own hands could burn its people's homes for gain. And if they could do it to free citizens, what chance had those in chains? Before Marcus could ask more, the heavy door ground open. 2 guards entered, their armor catching the torchlight. They called for a fighter, one of the Gauls in the corner. The man did not move. When they stepped toward him, he rose, slow as a coiled snake. "Not tonight," he said in a low growl. The nearest guard reached for his shoulder, but the Gaul struck first. A quick upward blow to the jaw sent the man reeling. The second drew his short sword, but Spartacus was already on his feet, iron cuffs swinging like a weighted club. The fight was brief, but brutal. Steel rang against the stone wall. One guard went down, wind knocked from his lungs. The other staggered back with a split lip, more shocked than hurt. From the corridor came the sound of more boots, reinforcements. Spartacus stepped away, hands raised as if to surrender, his expression unreadable. The guards cursed, dragged their injured companion out, and slammed the door. For a long moment, only the sound of breathing filled the chamber. Marcus's pulse hammered in his ears. He had seen fights before, over food, over insults, but never one that ended without someone lying broken on the floor. Spartacus sat again, calm as before, and spoke as if nothing had happened. "Remember this," he said. "They are not as strong as they look. Their power is in the rules we obey. Break the rules, and you change the game." Outside, the crowd in the arena roared again. The games continued, the empire's voice calling for spectacle. But in the chamber below, something quieter and far more dangerous had begun. Morning came with the clang of the arena gates. Light spilled through the grates above, dust swirling in its beams. The guards moved with unusual haste, voices clipped, eyes sharp. Marcus was called first. His legs felt heavy as he followed the line of fighters into the blinding sunlight. The crowd's roar washed over him, hot and suffocating. The air carried the smell of trampled sand and sweat, and something sharper, the metallic tang that clung to the games. Weapons lay on a table at the center. Short swords, spears, and shields, some battered, some newly polished. Marcus took a gladius, its grip rough against his palm. Across from him, a man in bronze-scale armor grinned without warmth. The herald announced them, voice booming across the amphitheater. Cheers rose, mixed with the impatient chant for blood. The fight began. Marcus's opponent moved fast, shield high, jabbing with quick, testing thrusts. Marcus parried clumsily, each blow ringing up his arm. The crowd roared at every clash, as though the sound itself were part of the entertainment. Then, a shadow moved at the edge of the arena. It was not a guard, nor a trainer, but a man in a deep red cloak, seated apart from the officials. His face was hidden beneath the shadow of his hood, but his stillness was striking. While others leaned forward in excitement, he sat perfectly still, hands folded. Marcus caught Spartacus watching that same figure from the fighter's enclosure. The Thracian's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, it seemed he forgot the match before him. A sharp blow brought Marcus back. The bronze-armored man's sword skimmed his side, the impact jarring but not deep. Instinct took over. Marcus feinted left, then drove forward, slamming his shoulder into the man's chest. The crowd gasped as the opponent stumbled, shield dropping for a heartbeat. Marcus struck, not to kill, but to knock the sword from his grip. The herald declared the match over, though the crowd's cheers turned to disappointed murmurs at the lack of blood. Marcus stood, chest heaving, gladius lowered. Above, the man in the red cloak rose and left, his pace unhurried. Back in the holding chamber, Spartacus leaned close. "That man," he said quietly, "is no mere spectator. He's tied to the fire in Capua, and to things that burn far greater than cities." Marcus frowned. "Who is he?" Spartacus only shook his head. "Names have weight. Say it too soon, and the weight will crush you." The torches guttered as the day wore on, the sounds of the games fading into the distance. But in Marcus's mind, the image of the red-cloaked figure stayed, still, silent, and watching. The games ended with the last light of day, but the noise of the crowd still echoed in Marcus's ears long after the gates closed. In the holding chamber, fighters tended to bruises and shallow cuts. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, oil, and damp stone. A guard passed by, tossing a half-loaf of bread into the corner. Two men lunged for it, their chains clinking. A brief scuffle ended when one struck the other hard enough to draw blood, then tore the bread apart and ate it in gulps. The rest watched without a word. Marcus sat against the wall, staring at the floor. The red-cloaked figure haunted his thoughts. Why had Spartacus connected him to the fire in Capua? Why watch the games in silence, then leave before the crowd's roar died? That night, the corridor outside came alive with hurried footsteps. The door opened, spilling torchlight into the cell. 3 men entered, not guards, but strangers in plain tunics, their faces shadowed by the flicker. They carried short daggers, the kind a man could hide in a sleeve. One of them pointed straight at Spartacus. "The Thracian," he said. "Orders." 2 moved in quickly. Marcus didn't think, he surged to his feet, chains clattering, and intercepted the first with a shoulder slam that sent him against the wall. The second lunged, dagger flashing, but Spartacus caught his wrist and twisted until the blade clanged to the floor. The third man tried to retreat toward the door, but one of the Gauls tripped him. The attackers scrambled to their feet and fled, leaving only the dropped dagger behind. Breathing hard, Marcus glanced at Spartacus. The Thracian was calm, almost too calm. "They weren't here to kill me," he said quietly. "Not yet." This was a message, from him. "The man in the cloak?" Marcus asked. Spartacus nodded once. He's no senator, no merchant. He serves a different master. And when such men send knives in the dark, it means they fear what you might do in the light. Marcus felt the truth of it in the silence that followed. The dagger lay on the floor, its hilt wrapped in red-dyed leather. A small mark was burned into the pommel, 3 concentric circles, like ripples in water. He reached for it, but Spartacus stopped him. Not yours to hold, he warned. It belongs to a game older than Rome's arenas, and far deadlier. Outside, a guard's voice barked orders, the usual rhythm of the night returning. But the chamber no longer felt like stone and iron, it felt like the center of a web, and somewhere in the darkness, its weaver was watching. The next day, no one spoke of the night's attack. The guards acted as if nothing had happened, and the fighters kept their eyes down. But the air in the chamber was different, tense, listening, as though the walls themselves expected trouble. At midday, Spartacus called Marcus to the far corner, away from the others. He held a scrap of parchment, creased and smudged. "This came through the food delivery," he said. "Not from the guards. From someone outside." Marcus frowned. The message was brief: the one in red does not watch the games. He chooses them. Before Marcus could ask, Spartacus continued. His name is not spoken in the open. They call him the Curator. He decides who fights, who lives, who dies, and not just here. Gladiators, soldiers, merchants, even senators, he moves them like pieces on a board. Marcus tried to understand. Why? For gold. For power, Spartacus said. Gold is only the chain. Power is the hand that holds it. Later, when the fighters were taken to the practice yard, Marcus saw it for himself. The red-cloaked man stood on the balcony above, speaking quietly to an official. A gesture from him, and 2 men were pulled from training and led away. A nod toward the weapons rack, and certain blades were replaced with others, sharper, heavier, unbalanced. It was subtle, almost invisible to those who weren't looking. But to Marcus, every move now had meaning. That night, Spartacus shared another piece of the puzzle. The mark on the dagger, the circles, that's his seal. It means the target is not to be killed outright. It means tested. If you survive, you live under his shadow. If you fall short, he didn't finish. Marcus felt the weight of the knowledge pressing on him. The Curator wasn't just choosing matches, he was shaping outcomes. Every fight, every injury, every victory was part of a larger design. And then came the final twist of the day. As they were herded back to the cells, a guard slipped Marcus a folded strip of linen. Inside was a single bronze coin, freshly minted, bearing no emperor's head, only the same 3 concentric circles. On the reverse, scratched by hand, were 2 words, "Your turn." Marcus closed his fist around the coin. The cold metal seemed to pulse, as if it carried the echo of the red-cloaked man's gaze. Spartacus saw it, and his eyes hardened. "They've marked you," he said. "And when he marks you, the only way out is through him, or over him." Dawn broke in a pale haze, the sky heavy with the promise of heat. The guards came early, their movements brisk, their orders curt. Marcus was pulled from the cell before the others, given no explanation. A leather harness was strapped across his chest, and a short sword thrust into his hand. The arena gates yawned open, spilling him into the sand. The crowd's roar hit like a wave. Above them, banners snapped in the morning breeze, but his eyes went first to the shaded balcony. There he was. The Curator, red cloak draped over one shoulder, face still hidden in shadow. The herald announced no name for Marcus's opponent. Instead, the far gate opened, and a massive figure stepped through, a veteran gladiator, his armor dented and scarred from years of survival. In his hands, a 2-handed blade gleamed. Marcus's heartbeat quickened. This was no fair match. This was a message. The veteran advanced slowly, his steps measured, eyes locked on Marcus. The first blow came like a hammer, nearly tearing the sword from Marcus's grip. He staggered, barely deflecting the follow-up slash. The crowd roared at every near hit, the noise a living thing pressing in from all sides. Marcus remembered Spartacus's words, "Break the rules, and you change the game." Instead of trading blows, Marcus circled, forcing the larger man to turn and tire. He used the sand, kicking it into his opponent's eyes when the chance came. A quick lunge, a cut across the leg, not deep, but enough to slow him. The veteran growled, anger flaring. His swings grew heavier, less precise. Marcus waited, breathing steady despite the ache in his arms. When the great sword rose high for a killing strike, Marcus stepped inside the arc, driving his shoulder into the man's chest. The impact sent them both to the ground, but Marcus came up first, his blade at the veteran's throat. The crowd erupted. Some shouted for mercy, others for death. Marcus looked to the balcony. The curator raised a single gloved hand. For a heartbeat, Marcus thought it would fall in the signal to kill. Instead, the hand closed into a fist, and then slowly opened, palm outward. The herald's voice boomed, victory, and life. The veteran lowered his head in reluctant respect. Marcus stepped back, heart pounding, and the gates opened to let him out. Back in the shadowed corridor, Spartacus was waiting. "You passed," he said. "But remember, passing only means you're still in the game. And his game has no end until one of you is gone." Later, in the cell, Marcus opened his palm. The bronze coin with the concentric circles was gone. In its place lay another, identical in shape, but this one bore a fresh mark across its face. A single deep line, cutting through the circles. No words, no note. Just a silent promise from the curator, the next test would be harder. And as the torchlight flickered, Marcus understood the truth. The arena was not just sand and blood. It was a stage for a war fought in shadows, and the man in red was its unseen emperor. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want to discover more hidden chapters from history, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to turn on notifications, so you never miss the next episode. New ancient tales are coming soon.